Jen has ordered a decadent seafood tower, king crab legs, lobster tails, and a waterfall of caviar. Pricey? You bet. But Jen worked with Empower on her savings and investment strategy and planned for splurges like these. She got good at money, so she can be a little bad. Ooh, champagne. Empower. Invest well, live a little. Start today at empower.com.
Past performance is not indicative of future returns. Investing involves risk. You may lose money. Advisory services are provided for a fee by Empower Advisory Group, LLC, EAG, a registered investment advisor with the Securities and Exchange Commission. OMG, those shrimps are really jumbo.
Hello, Nigel here. I couldn't help noticing that you're still awake. Now, I'm an owl. I'm supposed to be up at night. But you need your sleep. So if it's your allergy symptoms that are keeping you up, here's a word to the wise. Try Xyzal. You see, Xyzal works fast to relieve sneezing, runny nose, itchy watery eyes, and itchy nose and throat. And it keeps going strong for 24 hours, so you can get your sleep and wake up refreshed and ready for a productive day ahead. Be wise, all. Take Xyzal at night. Use as directed. Starts working in 45 minutes.
After just 7 days, 96% of Shiseido Benefiance Wrinkle Smoothing Eye Cream users saw reduced wrinkles and diminished dark circles. Shop now at Sephora and discover how change can happen in the blink of an eye. Consumer tested by 110 women.
Welcome to the New Books Network.
I'm Chris Holmes, and this is Burned by Books. Here you'll find interviews with writers you already love, like Jennifer Egan and Rebecca Mackay, mixed in with up-and-coming voices like Alexandra Kleeman and Rumaan Alam. You'll find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but check out previous episodes at burnedbybooks.com and on Instagram and Twitter at burnedbybooks. Let's start the show. The Fareown sisters, Joanne the Elder and Bernadette, live with their parents Henry and Sylvia on a family farm in rural Illinois. It is the 1980s, and the U.S. of Nora Lange's magnificent novel Us Fools is abandoning the very idea of family farming in favor of a commercialized, macro-scale agriculture that will forever change the landscape of food and farming in the country. The sisters will have a front-row seat to that destruction, feeling its effects on their dinner plates, which become barer and leaner. Henry and Sylvia, tumultuous in their lusty violence with each other, careen about the farm, desperate to hold on to their land and waiting for someone to pay attention to the pain in the heart of the country. Trying to extract herself from the all-consuming personality of her sister Joanne, Bernadette plots out a life for herself, of study and intimacies with men and women, all the while circling back to the certainty of her sister's connection to her, moths to the flame. When Joanne shows signs of mental illness, the family must reconceptualize itself in Chicago, waiting still for the country to show an interest in its citizenry as riots, racial killings, and a president's comic tragic infidelity prove at long last that there is no logic to the nation. A coming-of-age novel that sits at the heart of a farm novel, Us Fools moves like an electric current of lyrical violence from the late 20th century to the early 21st. But as with real life, the coming-of-age in Us Fools looks less like assimilation as adults into society and more like a reckoning with an inhospitable culture as seen from the very periphery of that nation. Nora Lange's debut novel, Us Fools, is a finalist for the National Books Critics Circle Award in Fiction. Named a Best Book of 2024 by the Boston Globe and NPR, a Los Angeles Times bestseller, and a New York Times Editor's Choice. An earlier iteration of it was shortlisted for the Novel Prize, a prize to recognize novels that explore and expand the possibilities of the form. Nora's writing has appeared in Bomb, Hazlitt, Joyland, American Short Fiction, Denver Quarterly, and elsewhere. She has received fellowships from Brown University and is a fellow at USC's Los Angeles Institute of the Humanities. She recently moved to Salt Lake City with her family, and be on the lookout for Nora's work in The Believer. Welcome to Burned by Books, Nora Lange.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.
It's lovely to have you, and I just love the books that $2 Radio puts out. I think it's not the best of small press fiction. It's just the best of fiction. They put out such amazing things, and I think they're finally getting more attention for the quality of things that they're putting out. even though they're such, like a small family farm, they're a small press in all the ways. And I wonder how you ended up with $2 Radio.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you probably heard that common refrain that your book ends up where it belongs. And I think that runs true in this case as well, in the sense that, I'm with Trident Agency. It's kind of a big guy. And they wanted to try the big five of the publishing world. And I kind of went along with it. And then a side door opened where I just thought, well, I love $2 Radio's books. I've been buying them at AWP or wherever for a long time. And so that was sort of my sort of junior high, pass the note to the kid you have a crush on, right? I sort of passed my book to them, and it all worked, right? In the sense that Eric called me and he just said, "This is the great American novel written from a female perspective." And my heart fell out. And it's funny too, to think that all this time later, even saying it, I'm like ridiculously a little bit weepy, but yeah,
that would make me weepy.
Someone got it.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, but someone got it, and that's what it takes, right? Is for someone to see what you're trying to do, the web of it, and appreciate the beauty of it, even if it's still sort of imperfect, right? And that was the connection right there, and that formed our family pretty much. I mean, I see them as family for sure.
I love that. That's such a nice parallel in a way to the story of family farms, which moves to my next question, which is that's the backdrop of the Fareown sisters, the small farm crisis of the 1980s and 90s. Could you describe how this crisis changed American farming and agriculture, and tell us why it was attractive to you as a historical moment for us fools?
I will start with the sort of tail end of that. And it was attractive because both of my parents originate from the Midwest. And as a child, things were pretty rocky, but my mom would take my brother and I there as regularly as she could, because it was a place that mattered to her. And I went to college in Chicago and sort of carried on that routine or ritual, if you will, of going back to the farms and meeting, it's hard. I don't know the right way to describe this, but in my family, from my mother's side anyway, there are a lot of people that are family, that are our blood. So it's, and uncle, it's very extended. So everybody. It's like a village almost, and so in the rural part of Illinois, in farmlands. Anyways, so I would, I did have Aunt Sherry, also not blood, but she was my aunt. And then all the other people that span out of that in Geneseo, Illinois. And I would go and I'd visit all these people, and I'd, take my college weekends, and I'd go there, and I would take the train to the Quad Cities. I mean, whatever I was doing, but I kept that alive for myself. So my interest, goes back deeply. And I think that, in the case of this novel, Us Fools, only until actually yesterday, I realized I'd been answering this question, which was, how did these characters sort of arrive for you? And this will lead into the first part of your question, which is, they arrived to me like as an auditory sort of hallucination, if you will. And I had been saying that they both arrived to me simultaneously. But yesterday morning, I realized actually there were two voices. Yes, that was true. But the other one wasn't Bernadette's, it was mine. There was always Joanne, but then for some reason, something kind of like fell into place yesterday morning. And it wasn't like I've been lying to everybody. It's just that it was my voice and Bernadette's voice. And so I had these voices and these characters, one of which was myself, competing with this other more radical voice of Joanne's. And eventually they needed to be, they had all these ideas. Myself, I'm talking about myself now in third person because now, of course, me is Bernadette. But they needed a home and they needed a shape. The ideas needed like an outcome, a place to land. And so I just was able to use what I knew of the place, the Midwest, and to position these voices and give them the form and the setting of the Midwest. And then from there, the research came because I needed to, what time and space are they located in on the timeline of life? And so the farm crisis, because I'm into ecological, I guess, everything. I'm sort of weather obsessed. I'm weather dependent. I'm climate obsessed. I'm climate dependent. And I'm interested very much in my animal side most of the time, as much as I can access it. And so I think that there being this ecological crisis and this sort of like emphasis on survival really paired well. That's such a maybe lame way of looking at it, but the things just kind of worked. And it luckily the intuitive elements, they managed to produce. Sometimes when I'm just going with something intuitive, it falls flat, or like if it's simply intuitive. But in this case, I was able to take the intuitive and apply a kind of more rigorous research component of like the farm crisis. And yeah, and sorry, I realized you were asking about how it changed the landscape of farming in this country. Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, I wish sometimes I didn't feel so connected to it. Like I wish I felt more detached, like a surgeon looking at a body. But yeah, I think, it went corporate and the messages from our government were mixed. And I think that, in both of those things happening, it left people sort of alone and without a safety net and sort of lost. And so, on the one hand, people were being told to expand, demanded really to expand, kind of like put up or shut up. And so people did, they borrowed. But debt is as we know, most people know very intrinsically, it's a very powerful paralyzer, debt.
Yeah.
And so I think, while they were being told to expand and then everything kind of fell out from the bottom beneath them. And again, specifically family farms, small farms, right? Mm-hmm. And then once that predicament was fossilized, the options became, again, that like sort of sell to the big guy or get out. Mm-hmm. But for people whose home and identity is very much connected, it's sort of like it's sort of its own form of suicide, to have to let go of that, to let go of the things that make you who you are.
Yeah, and you envision this crisis in a really interesting vacillation backwards and forwards across the 20th and 21st century, often looking back from 2009 to various pivotal years, especially in the 1980s, 1986, 1987, 1988. And I wonder how you came to the decision to really have a kind of wild vacillation back and forth, and to think about that dynamic as a powerful form within the novel.
Yeah. I'm pleased to hear it's a powerful form. That, of course, is a release, because at the time it felt sort of risky. And I guess the sort of the core sort of bare truth is that, while nothing makes sense to me, the only thing that made sense to me is how these histories don't stop. And that they aren't back. They're actually forward too. They're like both back, present, and forward. And it's not it's not compartmentalized, even though that's the way that we are conditioned to think of it, and that must be, and maybe it's not. I'm sorry, I'm making a proclamation that it must be, but maybe it's a way of like assessing it and not being overwhelmed. I don't know, like in a kind of psychoanalytical way or something.
Okay.
We have to compartmentalize as in order to process, because to go backward and forward in a loop simultaneously, that could probably it's vertigo.
Yeah.
And that's not also a way to function. But I think that as I was working on this and researching and sort of steeping myself, in these different times in our history, they didn't separate from the current moment. Which I will say made editing this book sometimes very challenging, because it would just be very hard to like not want to bring in something else, because it just was so crazy how, while we may not be calling it USSR, the Soviet Union, our troubles, our issues, our dynamic is so eerily, nearly the same color. And
the race relations and protests and riots against treatment by police, it's all we think of history as cyclical, of course, and it's it's never past, but it feels like it's speeding up in its cycles, even down to like Kendrick Lamar appearing to wear like women's 1990s flare jeans for the Super Bowl halftime show. Like it's all a little bit too fast in its cycling, and so that's why I liked the dynamic of kind of refusing the straight line of chronology.
Yeah, and I think my sort of other, I guess it's a sort of a dream operative is like that the reader is reading something, even if it's happening in 1987, but they're so in it that it actually feels like it's not time-stamped.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's unavoidable because I make a point of doing something funny and silly, like referencing some sort of, talking toy or whatever it is, I don't even know if it ended up making it in the final draft, but like, but there are these little like caboodle things that girls played with that were multi-tiered and pink. Anyway, like little things like that, like little objects that were very specific of the time, kind of the Kendrick Lamar pants, for instance. But just that, just wondering if you could both be in a particular time, but then also outside of it at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joanne or Jo and Bernadette both feel as though they are chased by the curse of women in their family, or even that it may be an hereditary aspect of their DNA. They respond very differently, but their lives are intertwined by the catastrophes, small and large, that seem to come in waves to their family. As a girl and young woman, Bernadette feels eclipsed by Jo, who is like a black hole for light and attention. And yet Bernadette barely understands herself outside of their relationship. How did you go about this kind of sisterly relationship? And is there something about sisterhood that carries, without essentializing it too much, something of this kind of push and pull?
Yeah, I mean, I think that starting with the end there, the latter, that my writerly excuse is that I wanted both these dynamisms, and the only way to have them was to have them in this form as far as I could find. And I don't have a sister, so I can't speak to that specific experience. I have a brother, but so in general, I can speak to siblinghood. And I think that depending on your relationships with your siblings, but in the case of my own, he and I went through very specific times together. And it's like one of these sort of, we're more than siblings, we're also blood brothers. in that pact, that vow that we took, that even while we're very different and maybe even many times didn't talk for long periods, not because we were doing a I can't talk to you kind of thing. It's just we didn't. But I think that tie, that sort of pact that we made even by sort of, I guess it's sort of the result of sharing the same context.
I always think of it as that families are, from the inside, very absurd. So many illogical things happen, and so many things that aren't viewable to the outside of that family happen, and a sibling is the only person who can share in the absurdity of that context.
Exactly.
And I felt like that was so true about Us Fools.
Oh, it's exactly how I feel about, that dynamic, that siblinghood, like what that is exactly as you said. It's, whoever's in that little tent, they share that space and those, the parameters.
The parents, Henry and Sylvia, who are referred to by their first names, have a tumultuous relationship, to say the least. They are propelled by a lust and longing for each other that sometimes looks like non-permissive violence, while being torn apart by the slow death of their farm. They are nearly zealots for the salvation of their land until debt and deprivation send them to Chicago. It feels like these two are the personification of the farm itself, bearing fruit, suffering through heat and droughts and the deprivations of winter, becoming desolate and barren. And I wonder if you could talk about that aspect, that kind of personification within their marriage of the farm itself.
It's so beautiful. And astute. It's like one of those subconscious things. I don't even know how actively I was trying to sew those things together. But yeah, I think that it's true. They are weather, right? They are.
They're stormy, man.
They are. And so in some ways it's almost, Joanne and Bernadette or Joe and Bernie, like they sort of replicate that tendency as well. Sort of like the highs and the lows, the heat and the cold or the chill. I think, in the case of the parents, I was, this has come up once before in the sense that they do have a violent tendency. Henry has violent outbursts and there is violence. And I think it's hard to describe other than what is in the book, what I was trying to do. But I was trying to, like draw someone's hand over that, the contours of that, like someone's hand being like the reader, and like so that it's like that create that sensation in the sense that I didn't want the book to be about violence or temper or temperament, but I wanted, and so maybe I used weather and those sort of parallels as a way to speak to more than just the kind of domestic, to get beyond that. Not that it's bad or limiting to just stick with the domestic. It's just that I wanted the scope to be both small and big at the same time. And I'd also say that in addition to my weather obsessions, it's sort of, Ovid, potato, like, these kinds of systems, and thinking about, even Shakespeare and all of this stuff, all of that was important. The sort of mythology was important here in the construction of the story and in the building of these and writing of these characters, so that, I didn't step away so far that I assigned each one of them, like, this one is the fire and this one is, I didn't do anything like that. Like they weren't ascribed certain elemental, designations, but I do think that, as a system that runs throughout the book, right? These elements run throughout the book, mythology, different weather systems, and you'll see those things show up, politics, and those are very large. It's true. And so, that was a challenge and a risk. And it seems so far like it's working for some people. But yeah.
Learning through play starts with Lego Duplo. With Lego Duplo, toddlers can develop real-life skills while having fun with colorful bricks made just for them. Large, easy to grip, and safe to explore. When children express themselves with Lego Duplo, they build patience, problem-solving, and empathy. See your child learn perseverance and self-expression with everything they imagine and create. Visit lego.com/preschool to learn more.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an Enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
It's funny that you say Ovid and Ovid, because there's a town outside of Ithaca that is called Ovid. And is meant to be named after Ovid, or however we want to say it, but is Americanized. But Ovid or Ovid's metamorphoses maybe is a better way to even talk about, rather than just a pure kind of paralleling of the farm. There's a constant reference to how things are transformed and evolve into other things, and that sometimes that evolving is very violent, and sometimes it's magical, and sometimes it's deeply misogynistic to the point of horrible violence, and sometimes it allows women the ability to bloom into something new and better. So what's Ovid doing in the metamorphosizing of these characters?
Yeah, I mean, as their mother, Sylvia, has them, because they're homeschooled for a time, she has the sisters use these myths to evaluate their present circumstances or what's in front of them. And so, so that's both happening on a kind of like internal level in the book, like internal logic, such that they're using Ovid to look at, say, television, or what they're looking at, like Sally Jesse Raphael, I think is one of the things that they kind of are comparing. But then as a writerly thing and a kind of larger schematic level, like I was as a writer doing that as well. And so what is it? I mean, I think that kind of going back to something you said, at the very beginning, I think you said that there's no logic to the nation. And I think that part of what these sisters are doing as they set out to, quote, understand the information, unquote, what they come away with is that it's just kind of, there's no answer, right? And sort of, if you're seeking an answer, go ahead and try God if that's what works for you. But, maybe explanations are more helpful, but explanations aren't a yes or no or true or false. They're more complicated. And I think that when I look at some of the myths of Ovid, Proserpina, whichever one I'm looking at, they don't have a straight shot. It's not a yes or no. It's not a true or false. It's complicated. And I think that the way that one might investigate one of his myths is the way that these characters are investigating the myth of a Sally Jesse Raphael episode, or whatever it may be. Reagan, whether it's Henry, bemoaning Reagan canceling his, inauguration parade because of the cold, but the man grew up in Illinois. He lived in Chicago. So how could he possibly? So these contradictions, right? So again, it's not, I'm a straight shot. It's crooked.
One of the things that makes me agree with this, with Eric's sense of this book as a great American novel, is that it lives in a lot of places geographically, and it also is both a kind of domestic drama while having these big, global and American reference points, from the fall of the Berlin Wall to catastrophic fires in LA, which felt all too prescient, the Monica Lewinsky affair, the LA riots and Rodney King's beating, James Byrd's dragging death, the Menendez brothers, and many, many others. And you seem to be working with different kinds of scale of what I would think of as chaos and unraveling, both in the family and in the world, specifically in the late 20th century U.S. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the scalar logic of the novel.
Yeah, I mean, it's a patchwork, and you're right, the scale is both big and small. And I think I started collecting, the first thing that comes to mind, which is abstract to some degree, but for just hang tight with me for a minute. It was like I was collecting ideas from marble. Thank you. It's not that abstract. I'm not going Pollock on you, I promise. But I was like collecting marbles and like little things that were ideas that I was interested in. And by ideas, I mean even ideologies, And I think that once I collected a certain number, I saw them as threads. And then I decided to carry them through the whole book from beginning to end. And so you do see certain, themes and ideologies that show up all the way through the course, through the whole book. And I don't know that I would, if my daughter were old enough to say, hey, I want to write a book and do what you did, Mama. Should I do that? I think I'd probably be like, it kind of made me crazy, Chris. That's like the truth of it. The book, I think not like crazy permanently, luckily.
My book, which will be read by only my family, it made me crazy too. So on a small scale, I'm with you.
I love it. But I think holding all of these things in my head and like all these books sort of like near me, I kind of would walk. It was sort of like I set a stage every day. For this period, I had a little period where I was really graced with unlimited time, and I used it all day, all night kind of thing to write. And so I would like enter this little space, and it was all set up in the way that I wanted it. And I would just plug away. But because I wanted to carry these themes through to the end, I felt like I was holding a lot in my head simultaneously. And that's where this sort of almost like a submerging as a writer happened. And I don't know, again, I don't know that I would say, ooh, this is such a great way to write a book. So to your question of like how it kind of was, I had to kind of like kind of just be taken over to some, and that's kind of how I feel about it. Like a little bit Carrie-like,
Yes, nice.
So, yeah. And not every, I can tell you, not every, I write lots of short pieces, essays. Yeah, I don't feel possessed or consumed in the same way that this book, that's what it seemed to have once it was what it was going to be, that's what it required.
Mm-hmm. So Jo's manic personality begins to show itself as significant mental illness in the novel. She harangues her sister and anyone who will listen about how capitalism controls the body and mind. But the context is that the sisters from a young age, quote, agreed not to make sense of our country, only in a super catatonic, blitzed out frame of mind on a bunch of drugs taken in fistfuls, knocked back with tangy wine coolers, and not to die but to live through the blur, would any person have a chance of getting through the cognitive process, also known as understanding information in America. this felt so weighty and powerful to me in our moment. And it also makes clear that at least from the novel's perspective, and perhaps Bernadette and Joe's perspective, that capitalism is a state of cognitive dissonance, and that being unwell is the most natural state of the experience of that system. And so rather than the novel seeing Joe's mania as a perversity, it sees it as perhaps the natural outgrowth of that cognitive dissonance. And I wonder if you'd speak a little bit to that.
Absolutely. I think it's absolutely the outcome. And I think that the danger, as far as the book's positioned of capitalism, is that to speak the truth, I think it equates it in kind of insanity. The system seems to not allow for it. And so I think that, yes, I pushed Joanne to some degree as a character to say some pretty outlandish things, but I think that that's also her humor too. She's funny as shit. Mm-hmm. And so it's also, I had to have humor in this book to write, to some degree. Like, if I'm going to be consumed myself and like taken over, I gotta it's gotta be kind of funny. So I think, to me, the perspective of seeing Joanne as crazy, unstable, is the fact that in this system, there is not room for the kind of truth that she wants to emit. In a kind of Benjamin sense, like, she, to me, is a kind of aura. And so, in a kind of age of mechanical reproduction, kind of like Adorno, Benjamin, that gets lost. And I think that she is aura. Joanne.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really, really nice. And it's funny that you bring up Benjamin, because I was going to ask a little bit about the cast of intellectual characters we get in the novel that are mostly consumed prior to Bernadette going to University of Chicago. They're mostly homeschooling texts and autodidactic texts for the sisters. But you get Jameson and Foucault and Andrea Dworkin's intercourse. I can remember Andrea Dworkin giving a talk at the college I went to, and then just thinking that all my life in terms of future intimacy was done. But it's the case that, and it made me think actually quite a lot of a book that I write a lot about, which is Never Let Me Go, where where the students of Hailsham School, whose fates are preordained, are given lots of books to read, but these books don't create revolutions or form the basis for radical reconfiguration of the society. And even though they're so important to the sisters, they don't really seem to change the world. And I wonder how Us Fools holds these powerful intellectual voices as a little bit ineffectual.
Yeah, I think that Us Fools holds these voices as friends.
Okay, I like that.
You know what I mean? It's like a linking of arms. I mean, it almost, I don't know if the listeners heard this, but when Chris and I were talking just before hitting record, I believe we're talking about a forthcoming piece in The Believer. And, we were talking about our love of The Believer, and just that when I had stumbled across that as my own junk kid, I was probably junior high school, either 8th or 9th grade, whenever it was. But I had found a friend in The Believer magazine. And I felt like something new was possible. So it wasn't that it's sort of like when you find something that both challenges you, but also confirms your need to be challenged. It's like both things, right? It's speaking to you, and it's speaking to you in maybe a new language or with a new color or a new syntax. But it's not that you can't hear it, right? So that speaks to something inside of you, even if it's a new way. And I think that, these texts, these thinkers, they're friends to the sisters in the sense that they don't further alienate them from their own thoughts or even thinking that they should have thoughts.
Yeah.
They confirm their right to think.
I love that. That's beautiful. So the one way that we could read the logic of this right to think is that for the sisters, it requires a kind of moving to the periphery of the natural and geographic landscape into Deadhorse, Alaska, wonderfully named Deadhorse, Alaska, and living together for a time in a 10 by 40 trailer where they are. I lived for a summer in Alaska, and my sense of it was always that it was just a peripheral place, both geographic and also in the way that it viewed the rest of the nation. And so it seems like the two of them need that perspective to be able to not make sense of the country, which they've agreed not to do, but at least to understand themselves. And I wonder why we end up in Deadhorse, Alaska.
Yeah, I mean, as a writer, we end up there for so many reasons, but like sort of the shorthand is that it represents a kind of crossbow of many of these American themes that the novel is attempting to tackle, or at least look at, maybe not tackle, but just look at or be with for a minute. So you've got this notoriously just exuberant wildlife, and talk about a landscape. I mean, and inside of that, on top of that, overlaid, you have ExxonMobil, you have all of these other things trying to extract these resources from this majestic gem. And I think that it just sort of surfaces even more, like draws to the surface, right? More of the themes that the book is attempting to like lay with. I won't say even like examine, but just sit with. And I think that the trailer echoes the sort of original, sort of beginning of the book where they're in an attic space that their mother delineated for them in terms of making two sort of iffy rooms, I think the book says, with iffy walls. And so the trailer is them together in one space. It's small, and it kind of, I just think it's like so they start young and together. They have this space where they're sort of apart in different ways, where they're pursuing different things. And Joanne gets sent to Alaska also because their parents don't know what to do anymore, too. It's both an opportunity in terms of real estate, like Henry's given a good deal. It's also this place that kind of holds this contradiction in a locket, the one that I was just expressing in terms of the wilderness and the extracting of resources by governments and people, businesses, corporations. And that, they find themselves there together, nearing the end of the book, right? And I think that they need that space again. And to, the trailer is this one remaining trailer, and what originally was housing, is an alternative healing environment for young females.
Yeah, that's right.
So it has this other layer as well. And that's kind of like my nod to like early Ben Marcus stuff and the things that kind of shaped me as a writer. Just being able to, again, kind of think about, as a fiction writer, I should be able to have room to make new things exist. You know what I mean? So while that is not true, that was not a place in Deadhorse that once housed, female patients that were deemed psychotic in this alternative setting, right? Because they were looking to basically listen to these patients as opposed to put them on a bunch of antipsychotic drugs and treat them like, heathens, if you will. And that is historically fact, right? There are plenty of things.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So with these alternative methods to try to look at healing and growth differently. And that, to me, as a theme, also run throughout the book. First, in sort of the beginning, just as a kind of the book stance on those ideas. And then you see by the time they get to Deadhorse that idea, that ideology or thinking, it has a positioning in the place itself having formerly been a place for these kinds of females. So yeah, it's just, again, one of those marbles, those things I was holding in my head for the book, that kind of runs through the veins of the book.
Nora, before I let you go, I would love to know a little bit about what you've been reading recently and what you might want to recommend to my listeners.
Yeah, I will say, so I have a 2-year-old, which is to say my reading time is a little squandered. I can say that I read yesterday in the New Yorker's 100th anniversary this beautiful piece on the color red. So I'll just run through a few little things. It's called Royal Flesh, The Fall of Red by Jackson Arne. It's really interesting, very thought-provoking. It's looking at the color red and, ostensibly, why do we have an aversion to it? And what's its strength, and how does it function in either a Turner painting or, in the case of, he starts with Vermeer's Girl with the Red Hat. In any case, in art and in life, what is the role of the color red? And then I had started in the summer, which I have not finished, but I can say is still kicking around, that I have every intention to finish, Miranda July's most recent book, All Fours. But the book that is ginormous, that is in my hands currently. So the New Yorker, shorter, sometimes easier to do between, temper tantrums. And then the larger book that if I'm awake at night and still have anything left in my battery, I'm looking at it, and forgive me, I'm going to probably botch her last name, but Svetlana, and the last name is Alexievich. Okay. And the book is called Secondhand Time, The Last of the Soviets. She was the winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature. I don't know what year she won. The book it's just, talk about timeless. It's big. It's an endeavor. She does a bunch of interviews with the living on their memories, like different age groups, different demographics of what they... So basically, like someone who loves Stalin, someone who hates Stalin, someone who thinks Gorbachev was the bee's knees, and someone who thinks Gorbachev, slashed people at the knees. So, a very interesting. It's quite long, so I'm eating away at it like Pac-Man. But it's talk about something that feels fresh. It feels fresh, even though I know it's about something in the past.
Well, it sounds like a worthy piece for your time. And I want to just get people to run out and get Us Fools from your independent bookstore. It will support $2 Radio, which is just one of the most wonderful small presses. And this is just gangbuster of a great American novel. I love the sisters and their relationship and the way that they are pulled and repulsed from one another. And it is a book to pick up and savor. And it was really, really lovely to get a chance to talk to you about it, Nora.
Thank you, Chris, so much. That was really a delight. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, that's all from me for now. My thanks to Nora Lange for coming on to talk about her debut novel, Us Fools. You can find links to purchase Us Fools and all of Nora's recommended books at the website, burnedbybooks.com. There you'll find all of our previous episodes, links to buy a podcast t-shirt, and ways to get in contact. As you listen, take a moment to rate the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Until next time, this has been Burned by Books.